First-person shooter campaigns are not really in the best of places right now. I mean, you go back 25, 30 years ago, they were all the rage. You had the original Doom games, Wolfenstein 3D, you had Duke Nukem, Shadow Warrior, all these different clones. Even down the track, when consoles came more into the mix with them, you had GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, the older Call of Duty games, some of the campaigns were decent, Medal of Honor, one of the most popular genres, the FPS campaign. There were so many of them, and then what happened? They basically died out the second that game publishers realized that multiplayer was much more profitable. You could throw people into the same maps over and over, you could monetize them, you could throw in skins, microtransactions, pay-to-win elements in the store, you get to carry more ammo, or your gun does more damage, pay us money for that. Suddenly, good level design, interesting stories. The first-person shooter as a single-player affair basically was dead at that point. They just weren't profitable enough anymore. And it's why, if I hear anything about a new Doom game, I'm somewhat excited. I'll say that the Doom 2016 title, its follow-up Eternal, I think that they're pretty good games. Do I think they're as good as maybe the old school shooters with that cool sort of maze-like level design? Are they as good as that? I personally don't think so, but they're very, very fun. I mean, they're more arena-based. They're shooters that are more about killing things in arenas more than exploring levels, but I find them to be a good time. I do find that the fan base is kind of split on which recent Doom game is better. Some people like 2016 more because it's purely focused on the shooting, the enemies, you're just going in all guns blazing, but some like that Eternal kind of mixes things up with some of the platforming and maybe a little bit more on the level design front. I mean, it's been a little while since I've played either of them. I probably liked Eternal a little bit more, but 2016 was heaps of fun as well. But what really caught my attention wasn't just that we were getting maybe a new Doom 3, let's call it. Call of Duty has had two different versions of Modern Warfare 3 as an example, so maybe Doom will do the same. We'll get a new Doom 3. But what really just got me excited is it's not just more of the same, it's sounding like. I was kind of thinking, yeah, okay, so it's going to be a follow-up to Doom Eternal, more platforming, more shooting. I'm sure it'll be fun. But a lot of people were kind of going, where's the new Quake? How about you mix it up this time? We've had a couple of Dooms, let's go back to Quake. Especially Quake 1, it had this really cool atmosphere that they never really captured again. Quake 2, which recently got a remaster, I believe people have been playing it again, it feels more sci-fi, whereas the first Quake, it kind of feels a bit darker, a little bit more gothic. It's almost hard to explain, but it's so unique. They never did that with Quake. So many people were thinking, why don't you bring Quake back, give it the same treatment that you got Doom? Obviously, that's not happening, and we can see in this tweet, and there's been a few sources on this, so it seems to be real. This person says the next Doom title is believed to be called Doom: The Dark Ages, and it's going to be revealed at the Xbox Games Showcase, so that's like 2 weeks away. But what caught my attention is when they said the game is understood to be medieval-inspired. And there has been murmurings about this new Doom for some time. So for instance, you go back a couple of years ago, there was an Xbox leak. Within that leak, there are a lot of things that I wish had have come to pass. Like there was a Dishonored 3, which doesn't seem to be happening. But one of the titles on the list was Doom Year Zero. And I thought, what is this? Like an expansion, maybe a standalone expansion to Doom Eternal or something like that? It seemed like it was going to come soon, but then we didn't hear about it again, where 2 or 3 years after that leak, we've heard nothing, radio silence, until now, really. And it's been confirmed that whether Doom Year Zero was ever a real thing or not, it's obviously been rebranded to Doom: The Dark Ages. I've got a bit of a theory on this. The reason I pointed out that people are disappointed we're not getting a new Quake or even just another sort of shooter, I mean, just getting more of the same old Doom, that might be kind of boring at this point. I'm kind of thinking that is exactly what is happening. We aren't just getting another Doom. Now, it's obviously called Doom, but perhaps they're doing that because of the brand recognition. There's probably a ton of people, they never really played a Doom game before, or even any old school shooter. They probably don't even really know what a Quake is, for instance. Those people played the new ones, and so the marketing team, their head honchos, probably said, no, you've got to make something and call it Doom. That's the only shooter we've got that has that branding, that sort of name value. So whatever they're making, they had to call it Doom. But maybe they are doing something else. And it actually brought me back to, you might remember some time ago, a year plus ago, Phil Spencer, he came on stage with a Hexen t-shirt. And if you're not familiar with Hexen, it's another first-person shooter kind of from that kind of Doom, Duke Nukem time. But it was a little bit different. It was more kind of sword and sorcery. You could actually choose classes that had some RPG elements. So I believe you could be a fighter, where you're sort of wielding melee weapons for the most part. Or you could choose more of a mage-style class. You'd still have melee weapons, but you could start firing spells. And there was different ways to approach the game. There was some replay value because you could go in as a fighter. Next playthrough, I'm going to be more of a mage kind of character. It was quite interesting. But the second part to it was, rather than just going through linear levels, most of the old shooters, you do level 1, you move on to level 2, and so on. They're kind of linear levels, even if some of them feel a bit more open than others. But in Hexen, you actually had more hub worlds, so you were kind of exploring these big, open-ended levels. It kind of felt a little bit like Dark Souls in some way, where it was an interconnected world, but each of these individual hubs, they all kind of felt a bit different. Maybe Dark Souls is the best way I can explain it, but it's not exactly the same. I love Hexen, even the sequel Hexen 2, I thought it was fantastic. I only played it recently. Great series, but I don't believe it ever actually sold that well. And if you know about these Hexen games, they actually spawned from another series you may have heard of, Heretic. So Hexen, Heretic, similar series, old school series, and Phil Spencer was wearing the t-shirt. At the time, I thought it was kind of a, hey, fellow kids kind of deal, where he just put on an old school gaming shirt, maybe from when he was younger. Whether Phil Spencer actually cares about games, or if all of this is just to help his career, I don't really know. But I never thought much about that t-shirt until now. I'm starting to actually think, what if the new Doom is actually just a new Hexen game? And they've put the Doom branding on it because it makes sense. The Hexen games never sold that well. If you make a Hexen 3 or even reboot the series, that isn't going to mean anything for like 99% of gamers. Most people don't know about these titles. At most, maybe some people have heard about them, but barely anyone has actually dived in and played them. You're not going to get a lot out of branding your new title Hexen. There's no benefit there. But they may have thought, if we call the new title Doom, and we just say we're going medieval, that's going to bring in more sales. More people are going to buy it because of the Doom name, but really you're getting something different. It is in all but name a Hexen title. Now, I don't think it's going to be exactly like the old Hexen games, where we're going to be exploring hub worlds and all of that. I still think it's going to be the Doom Eternal, Doom 2016 formula, where it's going to be more so based around arenas, combos, all of that sort of stuff, blood and gore. It's going to be all of the same, but it sounds like they want to mix it up and not just bring back all of the same old Doom weapons, Doom arsenal. They're probably going to want to mix it up a bit more, but they'll probably include, if this ends up being correct, a lot of the Hexen staples. For instance, you may have, like mana, I guess you could call it, where your spells, you actually have to use resources to fire them. You don't just have unlimited mage power. You can't just cast unlimited spells. The Hexen games also have a lot of cool pickups, different items that do different things. For instance, you could summon skeletons or different creatures to fight on your behalf. They might bring in more of a class system, so there is some replay value in the campaign. Do you want to be a fighter, more of a mage, or something in between? And maybe you get 3 playthroughs that feel a little bit different instead of just the one, where you get access to absolutely every weapon. I could see something like that being realistic. And even if that's not the goal, to basically be a new Hexen, I'm sure it's going to have some of the same DNA. There's not that many medieval first-person shooters. Hexen is absolutely the first one that really comes to mind. Hexen, Heretic, whichever one you want to go with, all pretty much the same. So I find it to be very interesting. The new Doom, I was kind of interested, but I thought, yeah, I mean, this just feels really safe. Why aren't you doing a Quake or something else? But I may have gotten my wish. It may not be Quake, which a lot of people are talking about, but for me, something like a new Hexen is just as good. It's just as different. There's a lot of ways that you could go. I've always said I'm a little bit disappointed that the new Doom games don't have that really nice level design that I love from older shooters, and that includes the old Doom games, it includes the Hexen titles. I love the old ones, where you can really explore a level, and there's so much going on, heaps of hidden secrets, sometimes there's puzzles, there's lots to explore, and I believe the reason that the new Doom games aren't like that is because modern game development considers it too expensive. If you've got these levels with heaps of different rooms, different paths you can go down, that's a lot of level design and resources. Whereas if you just throw players in an arena and they're staying in the same spot for like 10 minutes killing enemies, then they move on to the next arena and that's only one more thing they have to design, they consider that a lot easier than having to build, I called them maze-likes earlier on. I think that's actually a disservice, because if you go back and play like Duke Nukem Doom, they're not really mazes, they are smart levels. When you go through them, it kind of makes sense. The paths you go down, you get familiar with that level, and sure, you've got to find key cards and find where you open it, but you never really feel like you're getting lost all of that often. You're just going through what feels like very unique environments every time. Every level does feel quite different. Whereas in the new Doom games, you just get those arenas, and it feels a bit samey. Sure, they try and mix it up, but it's essentially the same thing every time. You're sitting there in the arena, you run around killing enemies, then you're done, then you move on. It doesn't really feel like a level, like old school shooters. I've sort of accepted that's probably not going to come back. You can play indie titles and experience those, but a lot of those indie titles, they seem to sit in early access forever, and then when they finally release, a lot of that hype is absolutely gone. Maybe they can change things. Baldur's Gate 3 had early access, official release, and that totally popped off. Maybe early access games for first-person shooters, the indie scene, they can improve that hype when an official release happens. But as of now, when it comes to the AAA scene, Doom is basically it, so I'm glad to see they might be trying something different. I could be completely wrong, it could be medieval inspired as a gimmick, and it's basically the same game with some medieval architecture, but I really hope this is what it is. We're getting a new Hexen, essentially. Hexen, Heretic, they're bringing all of that back. Hopefully they take more than the art style and aesthetic and really try and bring some of those gameplay features across, because Doom itself, just the FPS single-player campaign itself, it needs a revamp. It really needs to come back, because they are some of the best single-player gameplay experiences out there, and it seems like the industry has just tried to destroy them. Tell everyone, no, you all want multiplayer shooters. No one wants boring story campaigns. No one wants that from a shooter, come on. It's not true. When you play one of these games, they're a heap of fun, and if they can nail it, maybe that proves that we can get a Quake as well. We can get heaps of these style games. I mean, id Software's sister company, Machine Games, they're responsible for the Wolfenstein, the new Wolfenstein games. They're now making Indiana Jones. They kind of dropped the ball, I felt. Wolfenstein 2, it was a hopeless game. It was one of the worst FPS campaigns I've ever played, so they dropped the ball. id Software, they're the only ones who seem to be doing these sorts of games in the mainstream. Whether they actually stick the landing, we'll find out soon, but so far they've been doing a decent job, so I at least have some confidence. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.